what I've done is I'm gluing both sides up at the same time. When they get dry, I'll split that and then I'll size it down to what I need. See where there's a partial of a dovetail right there? The rest of it comes straight out that way. That's the rest of that dovetail. Kind of like up here. Same thing, it just clips out. That dovetail I just clipped out, right there, that goes into there. And that's how it fits. That's how it goes together. That's the reason I had to clip that out, because the rest of the dovetail, the other part of the key, those are called keys, is on the drawer front. Now that lets me know about how long I can trim off the excess of this drawer side. See how much is sticking down below that front right there? I want it to stick down about an 1/8, which is about like that. And that's where I'll start. I'm not going to glue that in there yet. I'm just going to dry fit it and just stick it into the cabinet and see how close I am on the height of that. The height of it, I'm good with. Goes in, it drops down, because the height of this case here is not connected to the height of this. The whole bottom of this thing is the runner. It is the track. I mean the support. There's just a big huge bottom. There's a gap right here between the rail and the bottom. There's a gap. So this is lower than that. When it clears that, it drops down. Antique dealer's solution for that a lot of times is stick a thumbtack right there. That just chews out the bottom of your drawer sides. Is what it does. Now a wedge could be glued in there, a real thin wedge, and clamped in place to build that up. But I don't know if it'll ever stick with all that oil that's on there. There's probably a lot of furniture oil and maybe some wax over the years. I may have to actually glue a block in between here and wrap that thing up with a block that's stuck in there well. It's about 10 o'clock at night and my patience is about gone. So good night, Gracie. Last night I replaced the bottom of the drawer sides, and I fit the drawer into the opening and made sure that the height would fit in there, and it does. Now I'm going to re-glue the drawer and reassemble it. This is a typical dovetail drawer from 100 years ago. You just glue every mating surface, everything that's there that looks like it used to be glued and would touch something else that was glued. That's what you re-glue. All surfaces. Now, you don't want to get so heavy with that glue that it ends up running all over the place. when they cut these things, they use a chisel, and they overcut it. It's deeper than what it needs to be. You just fit those keys, those dovetails, right back where they were, like so. And if you have a little glue that squishes out along that joint and inside, right in here, you're good. You don't want it to run all over the place. You don't want to mop up for 10 minutes. You just want to clean off what's there. And then I'm going to clamp this. I'm going to clamp this here in a minute. You can see on this back, this is rough cut. On the inside, it's smooth, and there's a lot more little skin places and scratches from stuff they put in there. Put it back in the same way it came out. The bottom of this back will have a hole in it where there used to be a nail. If you wonder where you put your extra glue, you put it on the bottom side of your table. That's why God invented the bottom side of a table. Now the bottoms always had some rough, you can see these rough saw marks right here. The bottom was rough, and they used an immense saw. I mean, this is a circular saw blade that was that big. That's half the cut. They flipped it, they ran it through once and flipped it over and ran it through again. The top would have been planed either by machine or by hand. If this in here looks like a machine, no, I think this is a hand plane. You can feel little dips where the hand plane did it. Some of them are better than others. I know the sides are hand planed. There's marks on them. Alright, they never glued the bottom way back then because this is a single piece of wood. It's going to shrink and it's going to expand depending on the humidity. And when it gets humid and it's hot in the summertime, it'll expand. When it gets dry and they're heating the house with coal or wood, it gets very dry in the house and it shrinks. So what they do is they put one nail in the back and they leave the front. They mill this down to, this looks like about a quarter. They put a 1/4 inch groove in the back of the front and it just slides. It moves. It allows it to breathe. That's the way furniture was built back then. There's some marks. See these skin marks on the bottom? That's where it slid over a drawer stop that was put on the bottom, and as the sides wear out, it lets the drawer sit down and it starts sliding and grinding on the bottom of the bottom. So when I put this back in, I'm not going to glue it. I'm going to simply slide it back in place. Slip it down. And I want to replace this nail. After I get this glued up, I'm going to replace that nail. Now, I use bar clamps. This doesn't take a tremendous amount of pressure. When you see the glue squishing out and you see that the gap is not there anymore, stop. You can crush these little drawers. These things are just 1/2 inch popper. They're not substantial. You can smash them. You want to really be careful about not skinning the front of this drawer. You've got handles sticking out. You've got this trim. And this finish is very, very old, so you don't want to get a bar clamp rubbed up tight against it. Now keep your distance away from that front. A miss is as good as a mile here. You just need to you need a gap. Now you see this glue that's in these corners on the inside of the drawer? That needs to come off. After you get the pressure on it, it'll usually squish a little bit more glue out when you clamp it. So you want to get rid of that. It's easier to move the camera than the drawer now with all those clamps on. It gets heavy. See that little line of glue? When that dries, it will be invisible. Just want to clean that excess. You don't want any runs or drips. Now the outside is harder to get to because this one has got a clamping block on it. I make clamping blocks out of really hard maple and stuff like that, and then I'll clamp on one side only. You'll notice there's marks all over this one where it's been clamped. The other side is smooth and it stays that way because I don't want to get I just don't want it to be rough on the side that's against furniture. Now I'm going to check it for square. I'll lay them down, and I can put a square inside here and check it, or I can do a crisscross measurement, little geometry. If this is a parallelogram, obviously it's a rectangle. If it's parallel, in other words, if this width, which is 24 7/8, is the same front and back, and this is close because this side is a little bit thinner on that one side. It's very close, and then it should be, if you crisscross that, which is kind of hard to get on that corner because that corner is been worn off, but if I can allow for that my tape to sit right where the corner would be, 28 9/16. That is very close. All right, I'm going to check it with an actual square as well. All right, that looks very good. This side is showing a teeny bit, just a teeny gap, but it's very, very small. I think I'm okay with that. The reason you check it is when you put this many clamps on something, you can warp, well, you can warp it too, but you can also knock it out of square this way, and then it won't sit in the cabinet in the hole. But this one seems to be well enough. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look across to check for warp. I'm going to look across this top to the other side, and if those two are both parallel with each other, it's a good indication that there's not warp. If you have any warp, you can see it. I'm going to show you an example. Get me 2 sticks. Show you an example of how easy it is to see warp. After I look at this, I'm going to put the camera on eye level with me. See across the tops of those drawer sides? See, there's an awfully little tiny bit of warp. It's probably tolerable, but there's nothing drastic. Some things you just have to use your eyes. When you're looking at warp, or looking for warp, and you're comparing 2 items, you can see these 2 items. If they line up with each other, it's pretty obvious that they lined up. If they're out, you can see that as well. And when something is got some distance between it, you can see when it's lined up, or you can see when it has a warp, a twist.